In this video, I'll show you how to replace this ceiling light. And it's in! In case you're new here, my name's Dan and I love to DIY things like this entry table, this pantry floor, these TV lights, and even this 1949 Spartan Manor camper trailer. Of course, before we start working on this light, we want to isolate it on the circuit breaker to make sure we don't get electrocuted. So the first step for that is to make sure it's turned on, as it is now. And now with the light on, we can go out and flip off circuit breakers until we see the light go off. And I have to do this anyway because not all of my circuit breakers are accurately labeled. So now let's go check that the light turned off. And sure enough, it's off. And I always flip the switch a few times just to make sure. So now this will be safe for us to disassemble. Of course, how you disassemble it will vary based on the light fixture you have, but with these simple ones, you simply unscrew that, the glass comes down, and then you can see the bulb. Here you'll see that there are two screws that we just have to loosen, and the holes that they're in are keyhole shaped. Now you can see this is loose, and we just rotate it like that. And it pops off those screws. So now you can see it's just hanging by the wires. And in this case, this isn't a big deal because this is very light. But if you had a heavier light fixture, you might not want to leave it hanging like that because it's just relying on the strength of those wire nut connections up there. So now I'm just undo the wire nuts by turning counterclockwise. And those weren't done very well. And this is free. And just like that, we have the old fixture down. So this is a base for the new lamp, and this is the old base. As you can see, there's quite a size difference. And I was a little worried about this because a base like this can actually hide a lot of flaws in the ceiling that you might need to do more work to repair. You might need to put up some mud or some spackle and then paint it before you can put up your new light fixture. And in this case, I think we're okay. On the ceiling, you can see the outline of where the old fixture used to be. And actually here in the middle of here is very rough and textured, but luckily our new base plate covers that. These screws are going to get in the way of our adapter plate, so I'm going to remove them. No matter what kind of light fixture you get, it'll probably come with a little kit like this that allows you to connect the base of your light fixture to the junction box in the ceiling. These screws will hold this adapter plate to the junction box, and these screws with the decorative circular nuts on the end will hold this base plate to the adapter plate. So now we want to put these in here so that these screws pop out of the holes like that. So now we want to find which holes or slots on this line up with these holes here. And we can see that these two slots line up and these holes are in line with that. So if we get it like that, these screws will come up through here. So we'll put these in. And when we put a nut on the other side, then we can lock off this screw so that it doesn't move in or out. And we want it long enough so that I can poke through here and still get the nut on. Because even like that, it looks like just enough is coming out. And with fixtures like this, where there's a decorative nut hiding the end of the screw, this is the most fiddly part of the installation because you need to get the length of the screw just right. So now we can see those screws pop up like that, and hopefully if it's the right length, we'll be able to put on these decorative nuts and it'll fit just perfectly. So now let's screw this adapter plate into the junction box in the ceiling. And if it really matters to you where those decorative nuts go, whether they're going this way in the room or that way in the room, just keep that in mind when you're positioning this where the screws are. Now I'm starting off these screws by hand and finishing them off with a screwdriver. And for our first test fit, we'll see if this works. And unfortunately, the screws aren't long enough to get through this, so we'll have to figure something out here. So unfortunately, the junction box is sunken in from the ceiling a little bit here, and just this little gap here makes it so that these screws aren't long enough to get through that base. One thing we could do would be to place some spacers between this adapter plate and the junction box to help bring it down. But fortunately, the screws that were in the old light fixture are the same thread, but just a whole lot longer. So I'm gonna put these in place of those. Replace these with the longer ones. And I don't think we need these all the way out because that was just showing. Let's try something like that. We'll put that nut on to help lock it in position. So hopefully those will stick out just about that much.
Now I'm just reinstalling the mounting plate to the junction box.
Boom. So that works perfectly. This new fixture comes with a bunch of rods, so you can have it hang down from the ceiling at different heights. But because the ceiling isn't super high, and I don't want anybody to hit their heads on this, I'm going to use the shortest rod. So we'll start off by threading this wire through the rod. And I'm going to twist the ends together so it's a little bit easier. And then you just screw it on. Now we'll thread it into the base, which has this little fabric tube to help protect the wires when they come out. And we'll put this on after we've threaded the wires through. And sometimes you'll have to pull one wire to get it straight in line with the others. There we go. And then just screw that one in too. And these wires are way longer than we need to attach to the wires in the junction box. So I'm going to cut these so that about 6 inches sticks out of the base. Now we can thread this fabric tube back on to help protect the wires. And that wants to go in. And a pair of wire strippers makes this next step really easy. We want to strip off maybe 3/4 of an inch from the end here. There we go. And if you don't have wire strippers, you can just use a small pair of snips if you have a gentle touch. It just takes a lot longer and you have to be a lot more careful. There we go. Now you generally twist those together. So here we have the hot, the neutral, and the ground wires. Now we find ourselves with 2 white wires coming out of the junction box. And so we don't know which one we should connect to the black wire of the light and which we should connect to the white wire. And it probably would have been a good idea for me to mark which of these white wires the black wire of this old fixture was connected to, but I didn't do that. So here I want to show you how you can figure out which wire is which. And the reason this is important is because the black wire on any light fixture should be going to the contact that's deepest within the light bulb socket. And the white wire, or the neutral wire, should be going to that ring that you screw the light bulb into, this metal ring right here. And that way, if you're changing the bulb and your finger slips and you touch that ring, you'll be safe. But if you were to wire it the other way, you would get shocked if you touched that metal ring and the light switch was on. So to figure out which one of those white wires should be connected to the black wire of your light fixture, I'd recommend getting one of these, a little voltage tester. And these are quite inexpensive, and you simply turn them on, and this will turn red if you're holding it up against a wire that has a dangerous voltage on it. So you can see here with the breaker off, we won't get a signal on either of these wires. And this is just flashing red right now so that you know that this device is still on. So we're safe, we can touch those. And before we turn the power back on at the breaker, I'd recommend capping these wires off with these wire nuts to make sure you don't touch it and get shocked.
And turn that breaker back on.
Now with the breaker panel on and the light switch on, we can test these. So you see it turns red on this wire, but not on this one. So that means that this is our black wire. I'm gonna mark it with a Sharpie. And so now, thanks to this tool, we can wire up this new light fixture safely.
And make sure to turn that breaker off again.
Now we need to wire this in, and obviously it'd be pretty hard to hold this light fixture up with one hand while trying to do the wiring with the other. So I'll show you a trick I use. And ideally you'll be able to remove the glass off of any fixture, but I haven't seen how to do it on this one. So it's staying on. To make this easier, I'm using some of that excess wire I cut off that came with the new light fixture. And I'm just gonna wrap it around up here and tie it off so that it can hold the weight of the fixture. There we go, just a couple knots, and that'll hold the weight of the fixture just fine. And then with the fixture, I'm gonna hold it up close enough so that when I tie this off, I don't need to lift it too much to get the wires close enough. So I'm gonna wrap this around a couple times and just put in a couple half hitches for those of you who might know knots. There we go, and now it's holding it securely. And there you can see the simple knot work to hold that fixture up. All right, let's start this off by doing the ground connection. Here I have a piece of extra ground wire from the new light fixture, and I'm gonna wrap it around this green ground screw clockwise twice, and then I'm gonna screw that in. Here's our ground wire from the light fixture, and this needs to join up to the two bare ground wires coming out of the junction box. In this case, these are aluminum, but I'm guessing yours would probably be copper. I'm gonna start off by twisting these two wires together a bit, and then I'm gonna wrap them around those other two ground wires. Then I'm gonna take one of these wire nuts and I'm gonna screw it on there. And that's our ground wire connection. Now let's connect the neutral wire, the white neutral wire from the lamp to the white neutral wire we identified in the junction box. I'm gonna have to lift this up a little bit here. Might be a little hard to see. And I'm gonna wrap this around that solid wire, and then I'm gonna put on a wire nut. And there's our neutral connection. The last one is the hot wire from the fixture to the hot wire in the junction box that we identified earlier with our tool. And we'll wrap that around again, and then we'll put on the wire nut. Nice and tight. There we go. I'm gonna push these up in here a bit, though we do have quite a bit of room in the space for things like that. Now it's time to mount the light to that base. All right, I have my two decorative nuts to secure the light fixture to the box in hand. And now I'm gonna support the light fixture with one hand. I'm gonna cut this little wire I used to hold it up. And find those screws. There we go. And put in the nuts. There's one. And there's the second. And just tighten them as much as you can by hand. Take out this wire. And it's in. Now that we have the light fixture up, we need to go turn that breaker back on. And before I do that, I always like to make sure that the light switch is off so that I get the satisfaction of turning it on when I come in the room. All right, back out to the breaker box. The moment of truth. I like this light fixture so much more than a standard ceiling light. And the light bulb I chose was the 60-watt equivalent LED bulb that mimics the filaments of an incandescent bulb. And it even has cool patterns on the ceiling. And of course, I do need to paint over that circle from the old one. With this fixture installed safely, this metal ring here is neutral, and that's what we want. And it's only this tab at the back that is hot when the light switch is turned on. So having the light fixture wired like this reduces your chance of getting shocked accidentally when you're changing the light bulb in case your finger were to slip in there and touch that piece of metal. So that's how to replace the light fixture. If you like this video, you might like this one here. And once that tip starts flashing red, it just lets you know that it's on. And if we put it into the hot contact here, you'll see that it lights up. And if we put it into the neutral, it'll just continue flashing to let you know that it's on. And ground as well will just continue to flash. But here on the hot, that would be dangerous to touch. It turns red.